As we continue our series on overcoming bad passions, today's message involves anger and contempt. Does anger always lead to murder? And what about judgment and penalties? How can we root out anger, control our desires, and mend the damage? Here's Pastor Seth.
Anger and contempt. That's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I am an expert in the area of anger. And by that, I say, if you had known me when I was in college, you would have thought, is that the same guy that is up here speaking? You would have been shocked at this because I had a ferocious temper, out of control temper. I was great at yelling. I was good at screaming. I was good at being wild and out of control. I remember hitting some doors at our house when I was growing up. That is until the door won one day. Put me on a basketball court in a hot gym, running up and down in a hot gym inside playing full court basketball. I'm yelling, I'm screaming at the other team, at the referee, at my own teammates. And it was really stupid because I was pretty short compared to everybody else playing basketball. And I'd go driving into the middle and all these tall guys, and I'd put elbow here, elbow here. It was terrible. That was about 40 years ago. And I can tell you, over these, I came to Christ at the age of 20, and this is an area that he has been working on for 42 years. And I can say that I have made some progress thanks to God's work in my life. And in our passage today and one other verse we're going to look at, hopefully will give you an idea of what to focus on when you try to think about changing your anger and contempt. Matthew 5:21, Jesus said, "You have heard it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.'" Now, the people back then, that was the sixth commandment, and they thought that if they hadn't physically murdered somebody, at least they got that one right. Check. Sometimes there are people that think, well, thou shalt not murder. Does that mean we should go to war? Well, in the same passage where we have the Ten Commandments, we also have the underpinnings for a just war. That there is a place and a time for a just war. We also have the same place where there's a place for capital punishment. That's appropriate. And the reason those things are appropriate, capital punishment and a just war, is for the same reason. Because life is precious. Life is precious. Now, you might think, well, I haven't committed murder. I'm pretty good. I think we can go on to the next verse. Well, let's go on to the next verse because Jesus drops a bombshell. I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, "Raka," is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. Now, what he's saying to the people is, you read that sixth commandment and you think, I haven't murdered anybody, there's no corpse somewhere. Check. Jesus says, no. You've just taken off the very top layer of that commandment. But there's a whole bunch underneath that you need to think about. And here he unpacks it in this verse 22. Anger, contempt, ridicule. Two other kinds of murders he talks about. Anger is one of them. Let's go on to the next slide. Anger is one of them. Anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. And then he says, anyone who says raka, which is a word of contempt or ridicule. It's the word that means empty. We would say, you're such an empty-headed person. It's that kind of strong ridicule, biting ridicule. And then the second kind of murder is contempt. Anyone who says, "You fool," will be in the danger of the fire of hell. Now, what is a fool? If there are 5 different kinds of fool in Proverbs, this is the kind of fool that is a moral fool, who thinks that whatever the commandments are that I'm supposed to obey, the ones I don't like really don't apply to me. That's one way of looking at this particular moral fool. Or the moral fool is the person that thinks, these may be true for other people, but not for me. Or I know that I probably shouldn't do this, but it doesn't appear to me that I will be in any danger if I go ahead and pursue anyway. It's a foolish belief about the moral world that we live in. Now, you may be asking, anger and contempt equated with murder? Anger and contempt equated with murder? Is that really what he's saying? If you've ever been in a verbally abusive relationship where you have been the target, you have some inkling of what he's talking about here. Or we use a term in our culture called character assassination. That sort of bridges the gap between what we think of as anger and contempt and murder. But when you think about anger and murder, think about the effect of anger. What effect does anger or ridicule or contempt have on somebody? When I was in junior high, this is about 50 years ago, I was in 8th grade, but I looked like I was about in 5th grade. I was the shortest kid in junior high. I had a very skinny body like a toothpick. I had a huge head like a pumpkin. I had curly hair and the beginnings of pimples. Now, that's not a good combination when you're in junior high. That's tough to overcome that. The only thing I could say was I was smart and I was fast. Now, there were a group of boys that were sort of like hyenas at our junior high, and they looked for sort of the weak gazelle out on the Serengeti to go after. And one day that happened to be me. Now, I knew about this group, and I did my best to avoid them through school. I walked to school when I could have taken the bus, 4 miles each way, to school and home, just to avoid those guys on the bus. One day, though, my mother said, "You've got to be home as soon as you can from school." So I went over to the bus, I got on the bus, and when I took up the steps and turned and looked down the length of the bus, there were about 6 guys at the back, headed by the ringleader. And interestingly enough, I can still remember his name. If you know me pretty well, names are not that easy for me to remember, even among my friends. I still remember his name. This is 50 years ago. From the back of the bus came this song, bathed in derision. Baby face, you've got the cutest little baby face. And I just died at the front of the bus. I sat down in one of the first few benches there, and they finished their song about 20 seconds later. And I was, as we say, mortified. Latin word for death. Something died in me. There wasn't a body. But on the inside of your handout, there are 2 kinds of death. One is, we think of a person dies. That was me. That day on that bus, and ever since, I've been fighting a battle to recover bravery in my life. Bravery died that day. That day, self-respect died. That day, confidence died. And from that time, I have been fighting a battle with fear. And on that day, something of budding manhood, starting to bud, and was covered with shame. And I've been fighting that battle for about 50 years. Now, there was no corpse, but there might as well have been one because of the effects of ridicule. Now, sometimes another thing dies, and that's a relationship dies. Ridicule, contempt, anger eventually can kill a marriage, or it can eventually, over time, kill a parent-child relationship. Now, usually those things aren't you don't have a corpse immediately, but you can live 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and look back suddenly at the effect of your ridicule and anger and contempt that have come out of your mouth towards somebody else? And there may not be a physical corpse, but you will find yourself at a crime scene. And you are holding the chalk. And there is the body of the one you claim to have loved all these years. That's what Jesus means when he says, you shall not murder. It's not just that physical life is precious, but the person inside of the physical body is precious as well. Now, he says murder's penalty. I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. Anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fires of hell. Now, he mentions two judgments that are pertinent to us. The first one, or two penalties. The first one is judgment. There's nothing that our secular culture hates more about Christianity than that there is a God of judgment, or a God who judges. Hebrews says, just as man is destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. Now, I think what our culture hates is the idea of unjust judgment. And you should hate that too. But if anybody is going to preside over just judgment, it will be God, certainly, and not man. Now, even if you think, I still don't believe in the concept of judgment, well, I would say you certainly do, whether you know it or not. Let's say that you're in your office this week surfing the internet when you should be working, and your boss suddenly walks in. What are you going to do? Minimize. And you're going to do it rather quickly, because you intuitively know you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, and somebody is going to hold you accountable to that. Not to some other standard, to the standard of work that you signed up for to live to. You intuitively know there's an honest accounting or reckoning that is reasonable and to be expected. The last thing you're going to do if you're surfing the internet when your boss comes in and you've been doing it for an hour, the last thing you're going to do is say, hey, boss, come over here. I want to show you how my fantasy baseball team's doing. I spent the last hour getting a few players. I think I'm going to do better. Or let's say that you're on the phone and you're married and you're talking to somebody you have no business talking to. And your spouse walks in the room. What are you going to do? You already know what you're going to do. Because you intuitively know that what you're doing is wrong, and an honest accounting is about to be held that you'd rather not have to meet. If you're on the freeway this week, and you're speeding down the freeway at 80 miles an hour, and you happen to notice his patrol car, what are you going to do? You're going to speed up? I don't believe in judgment. You're going to slow down because you do believe in judgment. You believe in honest judgment. Now, it's interesting that you'll do that. And even when you say, I don't believe in judgment, let's say the roles are reversed. You're doing the speed limit, and some kid goes racing by you at 90 miles an hour. What do you mutter under your breath? Especially if the police car finds him. You say, there's justice in the world. You believe in judgment. You believe in right judgment. And so did Jesus in this thing. But he says there's a second kind of penalty, and that is hell. You'll be in danger of the fire of hell. Now, there are people who like to say, I don't believe in hell. I believe in the Jesus who taught love. Well, I do too. I believe in the Jesus who taught love. I also believe in the Jesus that taught hell. And his portrayal of hell is just as matter of fact as it can be. It's a statement of fact, as we'll see in Matthew 5 several times, he's going to refer to it. It doesn't matter if you believe it doesn't exist. What matters is, does it exist? You can say all your life, I don't believe in hell, and I don't believe that anybody's going to spend time in hell. But if I was you, I'd do a little research. I'd be interested in that. Rather than just assuming that may not be true. 1 John 3 says, anyone who hates his brother is a murderer. You know that no murderer has eternal life in him. That's pretty clear. Not a lot of wiggle room there. Luke 16 is a great little story where Jesus talks about hell. Tells it, puts it in story form. We won't unpack it here, but Jesus certainly believed in it, knew it. He gives us here a warning that says anger and ridicule and contempt is serious business. This is not something to toy with. Not something to just say, well, I just kind of lost my temper. That's really not that big a deal. It may not be a big deal to you, but it's a big deal to the people who have to live with you. And over time, anger can morph into something much more terrible. Now, what I really would like to talk about on page 3 of your handout is rooting out anger. Rooting out anger. You listen to what our culture has to say about anger, and you hear the stupidest things. You just need to count to 10. Oh, I've counted to 10 before. All that seemed to do is kind of wind me up a little bit more. Doesn't really help all that much. You hear things like, you made me so angry. Or I wouldn't have been angry if you hadn't just fill in the blank. Now, things seem like that. It looks like that. It even feels like that. But is that why we're angry? Now, James gives us 2 important words. When you think about anger, you have got to think about these 2 words. And if you don't leave here with anything else about anger, you need to think about these 2 words. James 4. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires? If you're taking notes, put a big box around that word desires. That's word number 1. That battle, and then here's word number 2. Within. Not outside. Not your spouse, not your kids, not your boss, not your next door neighbor. Really, when you think about anger, you really should look in 2 places. You look outside of you, which we already do, but then you have to look within you. And what you're looking for specifically is what desires are not being met by this person. You are now on the trail of being able to do something about anger in your heart. You want something, but don't get it. Now, that is not just a statement that's a personal statement for you at the moment. James is also stating a fact of life. There are plenty of desires that you are going to have in your life. You cannot have what you want. Sometimes you can, and that's really cool when that happens. And sometimes you cannot have what you want. You say, well, that sucks. But it is the beginning of acceptance that will lead you to a deeper fulfillment of the very desires that you're after. You want something but don't get it. You kill and covet. That's how committed we are to getting our desires met by people. You cannot have what you want. Another statement that's true, a fact about life. There are some that you're never going to have. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. Now, what desires is he talking about? Desires within. Okay, well, there's in your handout, there's a chart, and we've got a chart up here. These are some of the desires that you may not even know you're aware of, but you have. You hope they'll be met, and when they are met, it feels great. And when they aren't met, and you're expecting somebody or some situation to meet them, and they don't, you will get angry. I want to be respected. I want to feel important. I want to feel significant. I want to feel valuable. I want to know that my life matters. Consulted. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't heard. My idea was belittled. It's not the person who didn't consult me as to why I'm angry. It's because in my heart I believe I have a right to be consulted by a person. That need of being consulted is your job to do that. Or your job is to hear me when I have something important. And if you belittle my idea or belittle me, I'm going to get angry. This is why we get angry. It's these kinds of things here that battle within me. Second list. I want to be loved. I want to feel secure. I want to feel like I have some companionship with you. We're in this together. I'd like to feel warm when I'm around you, or intimate, or close. I just want you to understand me. Every wife has told her husband that, don't give me advice, just listen. Just listen. Please hear me, what I have to say. I want to be appreciated. You wash the car. You wax the car. You came in. You tell your wife, hey, I got your car. Come look at it. She said, well, I can't right now. I'm finishing up this little chore here. What happens inside? Appreciated or included. These are the reasons why. Some car driver goes by you at 90 miles an hour and you become furious. Why? I have a feeling it's because something on the left list has just gotten stomped on. Or they cut you off. Something on the left list just got stomped on. Or your wife is reminding you for the 38th time to take care of something you said you would take care of. And you just want to say, get off my back. You may not say it. But when you think something like that, you are thinking there's a connection. Somewhere inside, she should respect me. She should admire me. Or I need to feel like I matter. You're not making me feel like I matter. This is the place where James points to if you're going to change anger. If you cannot find desire that is being not met or squashed inside of you, and you're depending on somebody to meet that, and they don't, you're going to get angry. Period. You can count to 100. But until something changes inside, not going to change, not very much. In fact, it's likely to get worse. Now, James 4:2 says, you do not have because you do not ask God. Now, I remember for years thinking that verse was something like this. You're at the mall, you're trying to find a place to park, busy, for Christmas season, you can't find a place, you get so irritated, and you think, let's pray about this. You ask God for a parking place, and one miracle, shows up, and there you are. Or, wow, we're up against our wall. How are we going to pay our rent this month? I've been worrying about this for 2 weeks. I should pray about it. Well, that's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do. But that's not the top application for that verse. The verse in James 4:2 comes on the heels of, and as the antidote to, why I get angry. And he's just put his finger on two important words. Desires within. And now he's giving us the remedy. You do not have because you do not ask God. Ask God for what? To deal with your desires. As long as I expect that my spouse and my kids and my boss and the people that work for me and my neighbors and my friends should treat me a certain way, I'm going to get angry. It's not until I begin to release them, to unpin them from my desires. And you don't have to meet my desires. It's nice if you do, and I like that. I hope you will. But I don't really need you now to do that in order to be at peace, or to feel important, or to feel respected, or to feel loved, or admired, or like my life matters. You are free from that. You catching this? This is the place at which repentance takes place, which change takes place. And he says, what do we do with our desires? He said, you take them to God. Is it possible that God can meet my need to be loved? The cross tells me so. That my life matters? The cross tells me that. That I'm important? The cross tells me that. That he understands the difficulties that I've been in? The incarnation of Christ tells me that. Now, this little word ask in our English language, we just have one word for ask. The Greek has two. The first word that James could have used is erotao, which is the kind of asking that you do from one peer to another. When Jesus prayed, he asked God. Erotao is the word used when he asked God. Or people that are soldiers and they ask one another, erotao. Husband and wife, erotao, ask one another. But here, James uses the different ask word, and it's the word aiteo. And this ask is from a subordinate to somebody who's above them, like a child to a parent, an employee to an employer, a citizen to policeman. Very different word. Think of the child and parent motif here with aiteo. The idea here of ask is not just that it's just kind of a casual ask if you get around to it. You know, if we have Christmas this year and you want to buy me something, I hope you buy me a new bike. It's not that. This word is the ask that depends, is asking with the hope of fulfillment. I would really like a bike. It would mean the world to me. I know I don't have the wherewithal to buy a bike on my own. But if you want to give me a bike for Christmas, that would be awesome. You are depending on the parent there for the bicycle. That's the word that James uses here. You are depending on God for the desires within you that keep getting you angry because you are depending on someone undependable, another human being. Anger is the natural result of misplaced dependence. All right, let's go back to our Matthew passage on the back of your handout. Mending damage from anger. If you're offering your gift at the altar, there remember your brother has something against you. Leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother. Then come and offer your gift. Now, worship means attributing the value or worth of something to it. Worship is not just a worship service. Worship is something, an attitude that we have towards God, whether we're here on Sunday morning or whether on Wednesday afternoon or Friday night. We value God. We worship Him as the most important person in our life, the most important entity. And here he says, if you are in worship and you realize that you were really, gave somebody a piece of your mind. He said, leave your gift there. First go, be reconciled to your brother. Then come and offer your gift. Now, the idea is there's something even more important in worship. And he said to do it now. There's speed and there's haste is the idea here. Verse 25, the same idea. And it's a different setting. Here you're being sued. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Now, there's some, just parenthetically, he's talking about a principle here. The application is not always what he's going to say in the particular application he uses here. There's some situations where you should go to court and finish out because it's the right thing to do. So don't think he's drawing a principle about settling, period. It's one application of the principle of haste or the principle of enraged bitterness. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still with him on the way. Again, haste is the idea. Something to be done speedily. Here's the reason. Or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I tell you the truth, you will not get out until you've paid the last penny. Now, what is he warning us against? He's warning us against what happens to anger the longer it's allowed to fester. And over time, anger can morph into bitterness. Bitterness just starts out as a little seed that you've planted in the ground. I can't believe she did that to me. I can't believe he said that. And then every time you rethink about that particular thing that she did or he said, it's sort of like you're taking out your little water pot and just kind of water in those spots. And you rehearse it again in your mind, and there you're throwing a little Miracle Grow on top of that. You go and you tell somebody else about that. You grumble and murmur and complain about what she did and what he said. And suddenly you've got a plant that's germinated. And what Jesus is warning us here about is this, what used to be a little seed and used to be a little plant can morph into the bitterness tree that can become bigger than life itself. That's what he's saying in this passage can happen if you allow anger to go on without trying to make amends or to settle with this particular thing. In the court world, we call this punitive damages. This is not the damages that the court found you should have paid, but now they're making a point. Now they're saying, you are no good because of what you did. We're going to make you pay. Now, we've sort of come full circle from where we started. About 30 minutes ago, some of you were wondering, how in the world can anger and contempt be equated with murder? It's because of what anger and contempt can grow to. If you were raised in a house where there was verbal abuse, you understand this all too well. And sometimes verbal abuse can morph into physical abuse. Or maybe you haven't gone that far, but you're developing a razor-sharp tongue. You're becoming an expert in being the critic with the people who won't meet your needs. Or you find yourself, I'm just becoming jaded. There's reason to be jaded about human nature, but that also includes your own and mine. There was a husband that was about 35 years old, and his wife's birthday was coming up. And he had pretty well screwed up her birthday ever since they'd been married for about 12 years. And he was so tired of messing this thing up. He was kind of feeling nervous about this because even when he'd given his best shot, he didn't have it down. There was something he missed. And so one day, I think it was about a Tuesday, he's sitting on the bed, and his wife is standing over in front of the mirror, and they're talking about her birthday. And she's looking in the mirror at herself, and she sort of sighs, and she says, I wish I was 8 again. Idea. 8. I know what I'm going to do. And so on Saturday morning for her birthday, he walked into the bedroom with a tray. There's a flower on the tray, breakfast in bed, and it was a big bowl of Cocoa Puffs. She got dressed, and they went off to Adventure Mountain for the day. They went on every roller coaster they could think of. They went on death-defying rides, the Wall of Fear, the Tower of Terror, and ate pizza and cotton candy. By about 3 o'clock, her stomach was not feeling all too well. She said, can we go home? He said, yes, except we're not going home yet. We're going to a movie. He took her to a cartoon. Bought her a big box of buttered popcorn, a big soda, and her favorite candy, Good and Plenty, just like when she was a little kid. Afterwards, they had dinner. Took her to McDonald's. Got her a Happy Meal with the super-sized fries and the chocolate shake. Finally took her home. She staggered in the door at the end of the day. Went back to her bed and just plopped down on there, just exhausted. Now, he came in thinking he'd done a great thing today. Finally, he got it right. He goes down and sits on the bed next to her and said, well, honey, Did you have a happy birthday? What was it like to be 8 again? And all of a sudden, her eyes went like this. And that look of, oh, now I get it. She said, you moron. I meant a size 8 dress. Misplaced dependence. Misplaced dependence. Say, well, Seth, what happens if when my desires aren't met? You're going to feel sad, and you should. You're going to be disappointed, and you should. And feeling sad or disappointed when your desires are not met is not a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. Because what it confirms to you is that God is at work in my life, and where I used to depend on somebody or somebodies for my desires to be met, God, I think I'm making some progress here. I am releasing some people in my life from having to come through and meet my desires. Whenever this happens to me and I feel sad or disappointed, I kind of throw an inward party. Kind of like, wow, God, you are changing me. Especially from those days 40 years ago running up and down a gym back at Baylor University. Let's pray together. All the many theories and professors and books that have been written on anger, countless seminars and workshops. You point us just to a few simple words. Desires within. Misplaced dependence. Aiteo. Asking God dependently. And as we finish the message today, that's the question I ask you. On what or whom are you depending for your desires to be met? What will tell you the current answer is your anger quotient. What will tell you you're depending on God is your sadness quotient. Father, in this area, we so easily, without even blinking an eye, don't even know we're doing it. Turn away from you to depend upon the people in our lives to meet our desires. And that's wrong. It's wrong against you. It's wrong against them. And it'll come back to bite us. Help us to let go of the people around us, to free them from having to meet my desires. And turn my heart and my eyes and my soul to you, to depend on you for my deepest needs and desires to be met. I am loved with a love that's freely given. I am important and valuable because of the cross. My life matters because you made me in your image, and I am redeemed. I am in your family as a son. You desire to use my life to make a difference with the people around me. All of those things are already done. Turn our hearts that way.
We invite you to come worship with us every Sunday at 9:30 in Irvine, California. And you can visit our website at pacificchurch.com to learn more about upcoming sermon series and our church family.